Welcome to Open BXRX Tuesday on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, and I'd like to invite you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. With teens now getting the vaccine and emergency use authorization expected for younger children in the fall, many families have questions about the COVID-19 vaccine for their children. Joining us now to address concerns and share some of those common questions is Dr. Margaret Aldrich, Director of Pediatric Infection Control at Children's Hospital at Montefiore. Welcome, Doctor. It's so nice to have you here again with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sonyi, for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. So, to start right in with these questions, a lot of families have concerns about the COVID-19 vaccine, and we're really happy to have you here to help us address some of these myths and concerns. So the first question, doctor, is how exactly does the COVID-19 vaccine work?
Well, not to get too simplistic, but the way that I explain it to actually to kids when I talk to them about the vaccine is I kind of explain it like if you were going to build a Lego set, you would get a little manual, a little book, right? That would tell you, put this Lego here, and then you're going to build your Lego build, right? So the vaccine is kind of like that. It's the mRNA vaccine. That's what we're talking about because that's what's approved for children 12 and above. The Pfizer right now is the approved vaccine. That's basically, that vaccine is kind of showing your own body the build kit. This is how you build something called a spike protein, okay? And so it goes into your body, it shows your body, hey, I want you to build this, and then your own body builds that thing, and it looks a lot like the spike protein that is on the virus that causes COVID, the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So your body builds something that looks a little bit like something on the cover, on the outside of the virus that causes COVID. And then that makes your body make something called antibodies, which we all make when we get an infection. It's how we fight off the flu. It's how we fight off many kinds of infections. It's our own bodies kind of, soldiers, right? You can think of them in those terms. So your body makes something that kind of says, hey, I'm a foreigner, I don't belong here, I'm from a virus, and then your body makes the antibody to fight it. So it's kind of like the vaccine is giving you a little set of instructions for your own body to make something that looks like it doesn't belong. And then that tells your body, now you've also got to make the antibody. Okay, so that's how your immune system makes the immunity, and that's how the vaccine works.
Thank you, doctor, for breaking that down in that way, kind of just simplistic. Because a lot of
if it's too simplistic, but that's the way I think of it, is like it's an instruction manual.
I think it's perfect because through COVID, a lot of people haven't felt that they have access to the information, or they don't understand it because it's overcomplicated for a lot of us who don't know about medicine. So thank you for that. So how was the vaccine produced and approved so quickly? I know that's another question a lot of folks are concerned about.
Yeah, and I do hear that. And I do, because honestly, hasn't it all happened so fast for all of us? Like our lives turned upside down, right? Within the matter of, a few days last spring, all of a sudden everything changed. So I can really understand when people are like, didn't this all happen too fast? Like, I think what I generally explain to people is that the technology we use for these mRNA vaccines, actually, it's been under study for other vaccines for many decades, actually. So we already kind of had, the scientific community already kind of had, if you will, like a blueprint of, hey, we know how to make a vaccine with this technology. And then you throw the pandemic in, and now kind of everything for us in the world stopped, but for the scientists, everybody kind of jumped onto COVID. So if you were doing research in something else, all of a sudden you're only working on COVID. So you can imagine all these people in the scientific community across the world, honestly, kind of put down whatever research they were doing, and everything went into making a vaccine. So when people worry like, oh my gosh, this happened so fast, the vaccine was made so fast, it really was based on decades of research and then human power to just kind of put everything into this because we knew how deadly COVID was, and we had to act fast so that we could save lives, right? So the governments of many countries put money into it. All of the ways that we test vaccines to make sure they're safe for people, all of those things were done. It's just the roads were cleared because this was really a human emergency. And so all the testing, all the appropriate safety measures were taken. It's just that things moved more quickly across nations because they had to, right? Because we had, as we know in the Bronx, we felt it. We had lots of people affected by this infection, and we needed to really act as a society very quickly and very efficiently.
Thank you, doctor. And in that development, were any corners cut in testing the vaccine and developing it?
So that's another question we get. I think what's hard for people a lot of times is they think of, a vaccine gets made and then it gets tested over several years before it, comes to your pediatrician's office and goes into your child's arm, right? One of the reasons that it takes years normally is because you can't get enough people to be participants in the clinical trials, right? You have to have human volunteers to participate. In the middle of a pandemic, there are so many people who can participate in clinical trials because this infection is running rampant through the community. So part of the I think one of the reasons that people feel sometimes this happened quickly and it was approved quickly is because, not because corners were cut. They weren't. Doors were opened and scientists and the governments focused their energy and their resources on this, but all of the safety measures were taken. It's just that all of a sudden you have millions of people who can get this vaccine in a clinical trial when normally for another vaccine, it would take years to get 1 million people in a clinical trial. You see what I mean? So during a pandemic, you have volunteers and you have lots of volunteers available and willing to participate in that clinical trial. Whereas another vaccine, it would take years to get that number of volunteers to participate and therefore years to show that it's safe. But in this case, we were able to get, not me, I didn't do the research on the vaccine, but the companies that made these vaccines and the governments were able to get many, many healthy volunteers to get these vaccines and to show in a short period of time that they were safe.
Got it. And since we're talking about vaccinating children, doctor, how many children participated in the trials and did they have any serious side effects to the vaccine?
So there were I'm going to really focus on the Pfizer vaccine. There is a Moderna mRNA vaccine, but that has not yet been FDA approved. I believe it's in process. But the Pfizer clinical trial had about 2,200 kids. Half of those kids got the vaccine and half got no vaccine. They got what we call placebo, which is not the vaccine. And of those children, the most common adverse effects were things like a sore arm, feeling maybe a low-grade fever, having a little bit of achiness after the vaccine. Those were fairly common, and I think maybe more with the second dose versus the first dose. And that's really in line with what we see with adults who have gotten these vaccines as well. So there really were no very serious effects that we consider directly related to the vaccine in that 12 to 15 age group, the pediatric trial. So really, to date now, there have been over 1 million kids. I mean, that's from about 2 weeks ago in the U.S. There were 1 million children, 12 to 15, who had gotten the 2 doses of the Pfizer vaccine, and we still see that it is relatively very safe.
Got it. Thank you, doctor. So I wanted to share that the WHO recently put out a statement regarding vaccinating children for COVID-19. This has caused a little bit of confusion, especially with schools reopening in September. Doctor, can you help us understand this a little better and what exactly, the confusion was there?
Yeah, I think when you look at the language of the World Health Organization, their statement, so I think that when I read their statement, the language they use is really around urgency, the urgency of vaccinating younger teens, 12 to 15-year-olds, the urgency of vaccinating children. In the US, we do recommend vaccinating anyone 12 and above who can get a vaccine. At this time, we do recommend it. That's the American Association of Pediatrics, the CDC, health departments, really New York Health Department. That is the recommendation, because we look at the risk of COVID versus the risk of the vaccine and any side effects of the vaccine. And the risks of COVID in young people far outweigh any risk from the vaccine that we've seen. Now, the World Health Organization is not dealing with one country, right? They are making recommendations for every country, right? That's their mandate. Again, I do not work for the World Health Organization, but when I read their statement, my understanding is they are dealing with many parts of the world that do not have vaccine or have very limited resources, limited vaccine availability. So their job is to say, okay, if you have a child who's 12 or 13 and can get the vaccine, great. But if you have to make a decision between the ill, immunocompromised elderly person, whether they get the vaccine or the healthy 12-year-old gets the vaccine, the urgency is on that older person or on the person who's going to have a higher risk of serious illness with COVID. I do not think they are saying not to get vaccinated as a young person. I think what they're saying is when you're in a place where resources are limited and you have to decide who's going to have the priority here, I think that is really what their statement is addressing. Because remember, the US, we're lucky. We actually have a lot of vaccine, and to the point where we can share with other countries. But many countries don't, right? So the World Health Organization really has to address that issue, right, in a way that kind of tries to be evidence-based and help ensure equity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Aldrich, for sharing today. I wish we had more time with you, but I think we got a lot of information out there for our viewers, and you're always welcome back to join us here on BXRX.
Thank you, Sonyi. I really appreciate the time, and everyone consider getting vaccinated. Talk to your pediatrician for your own child. I think it's kind of the only way that we're going to make it onto the other side of this pandemic.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll be right back here on Open BXRX Tuesday.